Illusia barely had 30, just challenged a 200 HP boss monster, not to win, but to buy time for a dying girl. That choice should have killed him. Instead, it turned him into a legend no one would ever believe. This is Illusia, the dragon who risked everything to save a human. Illusia knows he can't win. Even the voice in his head is screaming at him to run. Illusia knows the divine voice is right. But Miria saved his life just minutes ago and there is no way he is leaving her to die. So even if it puts his life at risk, he needs to do something. Baby Dragon reveals himself to draw the dragon's attention away from Miria, and as the dragon charged towards him, he uses his roll skill to dive out of the way before slamming into its face. When Illusia lands, he sees the damage. One of Miria's teammates is already dead. The other guy is barely alive with only 5 HP left, and trapped beneath a fallen tree, so he won't last much longer. Baby Dragon realizes there is only one way to save them. Illusia has to make the dragon chase him. This way, Illusia should be able to lead the dragon away from the people and then follow up to rescue them. However, the dragon isn't stupid. Instead of chasing him, it slams the ground with a skill and the earth explodes beneath Illusia. Then the dragon lunges at him. So Illusia decides to fight back and throws a fire punch right into its face. Baby Dragon is really proud of himself because the punch actually works and the dragon takes real damage. But a moment later, to Illusia's horror, the dragon's HP fills right back up. There is absolutely no way he is ever going to defeat this boss in his current state, so he needs to make his escape while the dragon is still distracted with its regeneration. However, the baby dragon isn't capable of carrying both people at the same time, so he makes the tough decision to save Miria and leave the other guy behind, knowing well that he is going to be dead sooner or later. Illusia manages to get Miria a good distance away, but Miria's HP is still dropping from blood loss, and she won't survive much longer in this condition. Illusia wants to heal her, but he doesn't have healing magic, so there is only one option left. He has to reach a human village so they can treat her. The baby dragon catches the scent of humans coming from this direction, so he grabs Miria and starts carrying her over. But then, Illusia smells something terrifying. It's the scent of dozens of gray wolves closing in on him, and they are likely after Miria's body. Illusia is eventually surrounded with nowhere left to run, so he is forced to put Miria down and face the wolves. A little while later, Miria regains consciousness briefly and catches a glimpse of a baby dragon fighting to keep her safe. But she is still too weak to move, so she passes out again soon after. Late into the night, Illusia still carries Miria, his body on the verge of giving out. But his efforts have finally paid off as he has made it to the human village. A baby dragon reaches the village and cries out for help, but to the villagers, it sounds like a monster roaring in the night. When they come out to check what is going on, they find the monster carrying Miria's unconscious body. They immediately assume the baby dragon is a threat and attack him. No matter how much he tries to explain, they can't understand a word he is saying, so there's no point. Illusia eventually realizes there is nothing he can do to convince the human he is not a threat, so he sets Miria down and runs back into the forest to avoid causing any more trouble. Sometime later, Miria wakes up in bed to find Marielle sitting beside her. Marielle explains that Miria was badly injured, so she had to use a lot of magic to heal her. Marielle informs Miria that she was unconscious for around 2 days, and Miria doesn't remember much from the incident, so she assumes someone must have carried her back to the village. Marielle goes on to say how reckless it was for her to wander into the forest with only dozen ingredients. And speaking of those two, Miria asks what happened to them. But Marielle has no good news to share. After they found Miria, they went searching for the others and discovered Grance's dead body in the forest. As for Dozen, they never found his body, but they did find a large splotch of blood on the ground near a tree, so it's safe to assume that he may have been eaten by a monster out there. Miria breaks down in tears upon realizing her friends are gone, blaming herself for not stopping Dozen from going on that expedition. Marielle tries to make her feel better by telling her that Dozen was always a hot-headed fool who couldn't heed warnings, but Miria tells her she is wrong. Dozen may have been rash, but he was a good guy, and he was always the first one to fight off monsters that threatened the village, so the children adored him. However, Dozen was proud as a warrior. Too proud, because one night, at the bar, when someone told him he couldn't defeat the rock dragon, and he happened to take that personally, and the next day, he went to prove them wrong with Grants. Miria tried to tell him it was a bad idea, but he was already set on his plan, so she ended up tagging along to make sure he would come back alive. That didn't work out so well. Marielle says it was Dozen's own pride that got him killed, so Miria needs to make sure she never makes the same mistake. But that aside, Marielle tells Miria that she did a good job of making it back here on her own despite how bad her injuries were. Miria is surprised to hear that Marielle says she got back on her own, since she is sure that she was unconscious the entire time. Marielle has no idea what she is talking about because she assumed Miria walked back to the village, at which point she was seen being attacked by a baby dragon. But she explains that she was knocked unconscious by the rock dragon deep in the forest, so there is no way she could have made it back on her own. Miria wonders if she might be misremembering the sequence of events, but just then, she recalls seeing a baby dragon fighting off the wolves, and she thinks he might have been the one who saved her. But Miria has no way of knowing since no one got a good look at the monster before it ran back into the woods. Meanwhile, Illusia has just woken up from a nap, and it looks like all his wounds have finally healed. Baby Dragon already knew that resting would help him recover, but he thinks it's crazy that he can heal from almost anything just by taking a nap. If Illusia had been reborn as a human, it would probably have taken him much longer to heal, but speaking of healing, he wonders if Miria is alright now. Illusia can't go to the village to check on her since the villagers would attack him in sight, so he has no way of knowing whether she survived. Illusia had thought he was stronger simply because he had leveled up, but in reality, he was still just as powerful as he had been when he was an egg. If Illusia had been stronger, things might have turned out differently when he faced the dragon, and maybe the other man would still be alive. But there is no use dwelling on the past now, so Illusia needs to focus on growing stronger from now on. Later that day, Illusia tracks down a colony of worms and prepares to use them to increase his stats. Baby Dragon begins a complete genocide on the entire worm colony, and by the time he is done, not a single worm is left alive, and he has officially risen to level 25, meaning he can finally evolve again. Illusia immediately sits by the lake to get comfortable and asks the system to begin the evolution process. Then Illusia is asked to choose among 5 different evolutionary paths. They are all some variation of small dragon, and then there is the plague dragon, but Illusia doesn't really want to use that one. Baby Dragon had no idea what the difference was between any of them, so he asked the system for a little help, and it began explaining what the difference in titles meant. With Little Dragon they become strong very quickly, but their lower level cap means they don't have much potential for growth in their later years. As for Kid Dragon, they are basically just more advanced versions of baby dragons, but they still retain the high growth potential of baby dragons, while mini dragons are kind of in between, with fewer potential evolutions, but a more stable set of evolution choices. From the explanation Illusia just got, he thinks he should go with one of the Kid Dragon variants. But before Illusia makes his choice, he asks for a detailed description of what each one can do. The system explains that mini dragons are a species with slow individual development and limited evolutionary choices, but good prospects, and that sounds nice. But Illusia isn't a fan of the whole slow early development thing. Next is the mini angel dragon, a protective spirit who swears to live for the sake of others. It can use strong healing magic, and that does sound appealing to Illusia since he remembers how Miria used her healing magic, and it would be useful to have. But the mini angel dragon also has extremely limited combat potential, so it wouldn't be very useful in a fight, and he needs something that can survive this harsh forest. The next option is the Kid Dragon, and the system tells him it is the same as his baby dragon form, with all stats greatly increased. Likewise with the Kid Marble Dragon, but the main difference there is that it possesses a mutation that gives it a polka dot pattern and a high affinity with magic. Illusia is heading toward the Kid Marble Dragon because the idea of strong magic appeals to him. But then the system goes on to explain the details of the young plague dragon. It is the first stage of an evil dragon that spreads disaster, but Illusia stops the system right there because he doesn't want to be an evil dragon at all. People are already wary of him as it is, so if he becomes something that spreads disaster, he is never going to make any friends. Then the system reveals something shocking, that one evolution could turn him into a human, and hearing it makes him reconsider his choice. If Illusia can take human form, then he will finally be able to talk to other people and make friends, and even if it means becoming an evil dragon, it might be worth it. Every evolution makes him stronger, but none of them let him become human, except one, the Plague Dragon, a dragon feared by the entire world, a monster that spreads disaster wherever it goes. If Illusia chooses it, he might finally walk among humans again. He might even tell Miria that he was the one who saved her, but the moment he does, every human will start hunting him, and just as he is about to decide, the system suddenly speaks again. New evolution path detected.